It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing In Your Face, Play Action Football, Trax, Operation C, and Spud's Adventure. Let's start the show.
Get some hair.
Have some respect.
Have some prunes.
Why, I don't want to take this and just give it one.
With new games like Ken Griffey Jr.'s Major League Baseball, Tetris Plus, and Donkey Kong Land 3, the world is a better place.
Nice earrings.
Nice hearing aids. What?
In Your Face, DMG-YF, developed and published by Jalico. So far, sports games haven't really made the team in terms of halfway decent games, but one sport we haven't tried yet is basketball. I can't say I was in any particular hurry to play a basketball game, given it's yet another sport I have no interest in, but I'm a professional, so I'm duty-bound, I guess. You can play 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. In 1-on-1, you start with the ball on the halfway line and need to run up the court to try to score. Getting past the opponent is easy, just hold up and you dribble right on through. Although when you get to the net, you'll most likely miss, which will result in the other guy stealing and converting before you even get a chance to put a block in. Each time I've played this, I've been 6 or 7 down within a couple of minutes. It is possible to score, you just need to get the timing down. Press B to start your jump, and then B again mid-leap to throw. Scoring is hard, but isn't the hardest part. Getting the ball back is. The opponent quite often manages to throw as many shots as he needs until it goes in. I just can't win the ball back. My dude just stands there like the skinny guy he is with his arms and legs spread, and the CPU just shoots it over my head. 2-on-2 is just too hard. The other team passes the ball around way faster than any two humans could, and it's virtually impossible to keep track of. I'm not sure what triggers this, but sometimes you get pulled up for travelling, which is when you're dribbling, catch the ball, and then start dribbling again. A foul in basketball. Are you proud of me that I knew that? But it seems to happen randomly. I don't press anything as far as I know, it just happens. I like the graphics a lot, actually. Despite the fact that the characters have no faces, the in-play game looks great, with plenty of detail. I suppose because the game only takes place on half the court, it was possible to have quite a zoomed-in aspect. Also, sometimes when you shoot, I think it happens more if you're coming in from the side. You get these rather impressive mini cutscenes of your player leaping Space Jam style at the net. It doesn't always go in from these, but I like how it looks. The in-game music is quite nice too, and never becomes annoying. The gameplay really lets In Your Face down, I'm sad to say. 2-on-2 is unplayable, and 1-on-1 barely an improvement. I imagine the game's strength lies in linking with a friend over the link cable, but like so many early Game Boy titles, the AI ruins the experience for single players. I'm not having a good time with sports games so far. Apart from golf and extra bases, they've all been pretty terrible. It's not just because I don't like that many sports, especially American ones. I'm being as objective as I can, and so far, most of them suck ass.
It'll knock you off your feet. It's full field views and playbook options. It's Super Play Action Football, part of the Super NES Sports Network, and it's in a league of its own.
Play Action Football, DMG-FL, developed by Toze and published by Nintendo. What an anticlimax to 1990. The final 2 games being a couple of throwaway American sports titles. It's games like these that really make me consider what I'm doing with my life. I have more games based on football, baseball, and the like than I care to admit to people, as a guy with zero interest in any of these fields. And that's what completionism does to you. It makes you a crazy old fool, and I'll say that with hand on heart. I'm an idiot. But then, you know what? I also have 4 Rugrats games, and 5 games based on the Mary-Kate and Ashley show that little girls and horny old perverts watched in the 90s. So, football. Let's get this over with. On first glance, there are quite a few options to choose from. You can play exhibition matches, or take a team of your choice through the playoffs. There are also some 2-player games. You can also choose from 8 different teams. Sure, I don't know the difference between Los Angeles and Denver, the Broncos, but still, that's quite an impressive lineup. It doesn't make a lot of difference in-game. The shirts might be slightly different shades, but with only 4 to choose from, there's not a lot of room to maneuver if you still want to distinguish between teams. So you punt the ball from the kickoff, there's a sliding bar that designates the direction you kick it, and you press A to stop. Then your kicker belts the ball as hard as he can. Now, in rugby, it's helpful to kick the ball as far wide as you can without the ball going out, and I try to do the same thing here. I'm sure American readers are chuckling to themselves at this dumbass Brit who doesn't understand football, but leave me to it. So, some play action happens, like the title, see? Then the game will stop, and you'll have to pick a tactic to use. I remember a friend long ago trying to explain some of the intricacies to me while playing Tecmo Bowl, but none of it really springs to mind here. I just pick one at random. There's one called Blitz, which sounds cool, so I went with that most of the time. When you first start playing, the opponents will pass the ball over your head and score all the time, as it's pretty hard to catch up with a runner. If you've chosen the wrong tactics, then your defenders will be nowhere to be found. Don't get demoralized, team. Keep your heads up and go again. You'll get scored on more than Leeds United, but eventually you'll figure out what you're doing enough to string a few passes together. If you can get close enough to the goalposts and then drop for a break in play, you get the opportunity to try for a field goal. And the mechanics are well done here. Whether you make the kick or not, a referee pops up waving his hands, and in places there's some very clear voice synth going on. It definitely says touchdown, clearly. Well achieved. In fact, I'm a fan of the sound overall. The whistling of the arc that you always get isn't annoying, and the music is very good, adding a feeling of pace to an otherwise plodding match. I'm clearly missing something in how to play this. It's an improvement on NFL football from earlier this year, as you can at least progress a little up the pitch, although the whole thing is still really slow. You think you're getting on pretty well, then look at the map to see you've only made it to the halfway line. Then you get tackled and the ball's turned over. Bah, I'm probably never going to enjoy this sport, whether on a TV or a Game Boy screen. So yeah, I'm sorry that 1990 had to end with a couple of not very exciting titles. Well, I don't know why I'm sorry, I was 3 at the time. Don't worry though, because 1991 is where it starts to get really interesting. Trax, DMG-TP, developed by HAL Laboratory and published by HAL Laboratory in Japan and Electrobrain in North America and Europe. Think of HAL Laboratory and think of a spherical protagonist. That's right, Trax. Just over a year before Kirby was born, we got this interesting little tank-based shooter. The mission being to save Capital City from the Master Tank Master. Not a typo. You pilot a spherical tank with a truckload of firepower through 4 levels ranging from forests to military bases to caves. It's not an auto-scroller, which is why I consider it a shooter rather than a shoot-'em-up. You drive your tank in all 8 directions at your own pace, destroying a wide variety of antagonists from the typical tanks and helicopters to more mecha-style baddies. A lot of the environment is also destructible, from trees to hangars and so on. The guns are fired with B, and movement is controlled solely with the D-pad. You're not just firing in front of you, press A to rotate 45 degrees clockwise. This feature is the unique selling point of Trax. You can shoot in the same 8 directions, independently of movement. It's a tricky thing to pull off with only 2 buttons, and you can only rotate clockwise, which might take a while to get used to, but honestly it's not that tough. The advanced weapons help a lot, and you can hold the buttons down simultaneously in order to align yourself more quickly. It takes less than 2 seconds to turn a full 360. The game would have worked really well on the Super Nintendo using the shoulder buttons to rotate, but Trax is sadly a one-off Game Boy exclusive. There are 5 weapons and all of them have their merits. This isn't like a lot of shooter games where there's definitely a best weapon, a BFG if you will. Rather, every weapon you can pick up has different benefits and strengths, and all are powerful as hell. Your standard gun isn't too bad actually. A lot of enemies die with one hit. There is a grenade with a slow fire rate but a massive explosion that deals tons of damage. A 3-way shot that shoots your normal bullet with a 45-degree shot either side of it. You can obviously still rotate in all 8 directions too. One that creates a duplicate of your shot shooting out of your rear, and a very powerful missile that plows forward through multiple targets. All excellent depending on your situation. They all have infinite ammunition too, but if you get hit at all, you lose it. That's alright though, because maneuverability is so sharp and the hitbox is so accurate, and there are many pickups hidden within the trucks or buildings. The look of the game is excellent, with HAL's typical cartoonish style very much evident. There's a lovely level of detail in the background, and the bosses are often these massive lurching monsters that circle you, needing skillful use of the firepower and the rotation to beat. I'm not keen on the phrase hidden gem because 90% of the time using it simply indicates a lack of research on the reviewer's part, like it's hidden simply because you didn't hear about it until now. Trax is, however, one of those that's not really spoken about. I had it as a kid, so it wasn't hidden from me, and a gem it most certainly is. It's a bit more expensive than your average Game Boy cart, but not so it's unaffordable. If I can help unveil it to more people, then I'll be very happy. A great start to the year that gets even better with the very next release. You'll see. Oh boy, 1991 is gonna be awesome, isn't it?
Three-way scroll. High position visual. Sound selective mode. It's a super AV action. Contra. ファミコン用カセットコントラ好評発売中。Konami.
Operation C, DMG-CN, developed by Konami and published by Konami in Japan, Ultra Games in North America, and Palcom Software in Europe. You have no idea how high my anticipation levels were for this one. A regular bedfellow of Kirby's Dream Land and Link's Awakening on any given top 25 list is the first portable entry in the gold standard franchise of run-and-gun shooter games. Originally, Contra was released in arcades, and then most famously on the NES and Famicom. In Europe, for whatever reason, the name Probotector was chosen, with a reskin of robots instead of humans. It's weird that the idea of humans gunning down other humans was too much for the European market, but it was okay for the original game to share a name with the US-funded rebel militias of mid-80s Nicaragua. This raised a lot of controversy at the time, especially considering that some of the levels could easily be interpreted as a Central American jungle. Of course, the game is thankfully unrelated to what was a shocking period of history, but it was a poor oversight on Konami's part nonetheless. It was changed by the time the sequel came out, but still. The original arcade and NES titles are 1 or 2 player. Here it's just 1. Taking place in the distant future, you control these 2 Rambo-style guys with massive machine guns and no shirts through various forests, up waterfalls, and around industrial wastelands, basically blowing the living hell out of anything that moves, human or otherwise. Ultimately, you've got to seek out and destroy the alien overlord invader. The first two NES games, Contra and Super C, are undeniable classics and highly sought after games that are timeless. The Game Boy entry in the series borrows heavily from both of those games and more than does each of them justice. The side-scrolling levels are accompanied by the vertical top-down ones from Super C. Wisely, the pseudo 3D stages from the first game were not attempted, and they look excellent. Everything is superbly proportioned for the littler screen, with brand new levels. It's not just a port, designed to accommodate for the reduced space. There's the usual endless cannon fodder of drones who run mindlessly towards you, amongst a scattering of unique enemies, and a whole roster of brand new bosses to fight. Nothing was merely copied here. It's all new, but unquestionably Contra. Thankfully, the button mashing necessary when you had the pea shooter is not here. Can you imagine trying to keep the screen still while smashing A over and over? You start with the automatic machine gun and can power it up with a really cool exploding flamethrower, a laser, and the famous spread shot. In fact, the spread shot is even more awesome in this game, as you can power it up a second time for more rapid fire, with absolutely no flicker or slowdown, by the way, and even more wickedly, a homing effect that causes all bullets to swarm straight for any antagonist. At first, this feels a bit like a cheese, but plenty of skill is still required, trust me. It's a tough, one-hit death game, but that's what you want from one of these. Life bars are for wussies. The controls are perfect, so progress is 100% down to your skill and response time. I personally think this is one example of a game that looks better on the Game Boy. Respective of medium, it's a bit blurry on the original DMG. If you can, take a moment to appreciate the level of detail in the animations of the backgrounds, the water moving on the first level, right the way through to the globular walls and flashing lights of later stages. The bosses look ridiculously good, with the first one being this particularly memorable submarine that's wider than the actual screen, shooting up at you from the water while you have to run back and forth on this bridge shooting downwards. Similarly, the music is absolutely stellar, with some instantly identifiable motifs that sound just as good, if not better than the originals the tracks are based on. Konami really knew how to crank some masterpieces out of the Game Boy's sound chip, and this is definitely up there with their best sounding stuff. The presentation and gameplay of Operation C can be heralded as a real pinnacle of Konami's Game Boy portfolio. It's mind-boggling how they pulled this off, and I have no qualms whatsoever about awarding Operation C a perfect score. Absolutely outstanding. Spud's Adventure DMG-TV, developed and published by Atlas. O daughter, thou art beautiful. Why don't we find you a husband? Good to know that we're firmly in the 90s now and chivalry is still alive and well. You guessed it, that girl's getting kidnapped. She's like a tomato or something this time though, as if that makes all the difference. You're the eponymous Spud, who is, you guessed it, a potato, and you have to climb this massive, foreboding tower, killing the constantly respawning enemies around the mazes, while also solving puzzles and speaking to various foodstuffs along the way. There are elements of a Sukoban-style puzzler on some floors, but it's never anywhere near as hard or thought out as Boxel, for instance. You fight bosses at the end of each area, the first of which is a giant bell pepper. You can find a power-up that turns your shot into a version of yourself. Yeah, you're firing life-size Spuds out at the enemies. At first I thought this was a glitch, but apparently it was intended. Also, you can pick up this playing card with arms to make yourself double in size for a time, allowing you to trample enemies without having to fire. The maze layout could be accused of being a little formulaic, but the variety is there in parts as you go along. Some rooms have intermittent lighting or invisible walls to figure out. I suppose this is a cousin to Atlas's much more successful title, Quirk, in that The overall themes are there, and you're trying to figure out how to get through each room to the stairwell at the end, but it doesn't really feel like that. You're looking at the game much closer up, and there's more of a feeling of floors blending into each other here, whereas with Quirk, the levels could be interpreted as being more separate from each other. The music is pretty well composed, a particular strength of Atlas, although it bugs me how the songs restart when you change floors. It's kind of jarring. A continuous loop would have been better. The soundtrack needs more depth too. The style is pretty childlike, as is the overall concept, to be fair, with very limited backgrounds. The boss fights take place in a solid black room, and I often don't know what's going on. There are many times when you're faced with a choice of exits to a floor with no indication other than blind chance which one will take you further and which one will send you backwards. This adds something of a dull longevity to the game when you're really just looking to get on with it. The story is stupid as hell too, aside from the fact that you play as a plethora of vegetables trying to save the vegetable kingdom from the kitchen invaders or something. You play the second level as a turnip or an aubergine, I don't know, and after beating the boss, you get shown a cutscene of a carrot called Gerrit Carrot getting shot at by a cannon. Spud, previously not present on this level, but whatever, saves him. The clearly depressed carrot angrily exclaims, "I didn't ask for your help, I won't thank you." There's a particularly harrowing cutscene featuring the death of Arnie the aubergine. What in the green hell is going on here? For a distinctly average game, Spud's Adventure is actually kind of infamous. That's because it's often touted as one of the rarest Game Boy titles, due to Atlas losing the major party support they had with Quirk. As such, the rollout was decidedly limited, with the cartridges alone frequently fetching 3-digit sums, and complete copies being astronomically higher than that. If you can find this for less than, I don't know, £10, which you almost certainly won't, by the way, then pick it up. It's not horrible by any means, and even has some cool parts, but the fact you'll have to sell your dog to buy it sucks a lot of the joy out. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.